Hi guys, Spencer Harp here, Sharp Engineering. Sorry about the shaky hand. Haven't had my Mountain Dew this morning. Anyway, had a couple questions about the fuel pump, the fuel cells, how everything was routed. This is one of our fuel cells. This is the newest cell that we have. Our other cells have a bulkhead in the bottom of them where we use the stock fuel pump. Stock fuel pumps are great because they came preset. We could get them readily off the motorcycle and put them in and go. What we found though is after about a year of running, especially after they sit over the winter, we start having problems with them. So you can't find them as cheap as we once could, so we had to come up with a solution, to kind of work around that. I came out and talked about our fuel pump and what we're doing with that whole assembly. Going to an inline pump. I talked about that in a previous video, but some people had questions about how to install them. What if they didn't have one of the new fuel cells? Do they need to get the new fuel cell, etc.? So I'm just going to kind of go through all of that. Our cells currently, they have a screw-on cap. I'm not a huge fan of the D-ring style caps, the big D-rings, because the little O-rings in them with modern gasoline, they tend to swell up and fall out, and you got a loose cap. So we went to a screw-on style cap with an O-ring. It's a lot more secure in terms of like rollover, fuel spill prevention, etc. And we did away with the bulkhead in the bottom of the tank, and hopefully, that would offset the cost of, going to an inline pump. One thing we see a lot of, especially with cars that are out of town, is people don't look at the rating on their fuel line. So you just want to make sure that you're running a fuel line that's actually rated for fuel injection systems. You can pick that up from an auto parts store, or you can order it directly from us, but there are two different style fuel lines out there. One's rated for about 70 psi, which is what they consider the low pressure line, and then you've got one that's rated for EFI systems, which has a burst pressure of like 200 psi. So it's very important that you're using the correct fuel line. If not, you could potentially run into some issues down the road where you have fire related problems. The inline pump that we're running is just a universal inline pump. You can actually pick up that pump from an auto parts store, which is part of the reason why we went to that style pump, this pump. You can look it up for like some of the older Chevrolet pickup trucks, throttle body injection trucks, but it's got two screw terminals. I would recommend running a toggle switch, sending power to it. This pump's going to draw a little more amperage than your stock pump would, and you can drive it off the computer, so you can take the existing lines that are there. But it's kind of a fail-safe, and to save the computer circuitry, I'd say run it off a toggle switch to be on the safe side. If you've got one of our old style fuel tanks, we made this adapter that allow you to have a supply line and a return line going into the gas tank, and using the same bulkhead that's pre-existing, so you don't have to update to a new fuel cell to run the inline system. All right, so to go with that inline system, we had to get a regulator that was tamper resistant in terms of fuel pressure, so that we're running a consistent fuel pressure across all the cars. We use an OEM style fuel pressure regulator, and a pump again that you can get from an auto parts store with a warranty. So that's the plus there. This particular pump comes with a different style fitting screwed on the end of it. Make sure that if you're swapping to the other one, there's an O-ring that hangs out in there. It's currently laying by the other fitting. Make sure that you move that O-ring over from one fitting to the other. That way you don't have any leaks when you're putting the system together. Fortunately, I don't have a tripod, so I'm going to have to kind of move my hand around to get it to get everything where you can see it. Let's screw this guy on. But basically, what we've got here is you've got on the new tank, you've got a fuel return line. The fittings are labeled, the fuel pickup, and then a rollover vent. The rollover vent, what we normally do with that is we take it, we come off of here. All of these fittings are 6AN fittings, so you need a 6AN fitting to 3/8 barb, or 6AN to an AN hose if you want to run AN hoses. But we take the rollover vent line, we run it across the car down, and we make a full loop with that rollover vent line, so that in the event the car does flip over, any fuel that has escaped the vent can't actually pour out. So it's important that thing has a loop put in it. Now the loop isn't mandatory because this rollover vent valve actually has a ball in it that's supposed to stop any fuel from spilling out of the tank. But as a secondary measure, we put a loop in a line, essentially creating a full 360 degrees so that if it rolls over, that loop would create essentially a checkpoint for the spillage. The fuel pickup is just what it sounds like. It's the pickup. It's where the fuel is coming from. The fuel returns where the fuel is returning to the tank. So the fuel pickup would come out of here, go over to the suction side of the pump, and the suction side of the pump on every pump that I've ever encountered has been on the side opposite of the electrical connections. It comes out of the pump and it would go into one side of your regulator, come out of the regulator and go to the injector supply lines. It's an old dirty set of 04 and 5 fuel rail here, but it would go to that supply line. Then we would take this return line here and send it back to the tank in the return fitting section. All right, so again, out of the pickup, into the pump, out of the pump, into the regulator, out of the regulator, into the line here. And then we take this line here, which is the return line, and send it back to the fuel return. This vent here isn't used. You can, it's a vacuum reference. So if you had a car that had, you know, where you wanted to regulate the pressure based on manifold pressure or whatever, we could put a, you could have a vacuum line there. That was an OEM attribute, basically. The adapter plate, either one of these fittings can be used as a supply and return, so it doesn't matter. So if you're using an adapter plate, you would come out of one fitting into the pump, through the regulator again, and then take your return line and run it back to the other fitting in the tank. So we sell this plate, the pump and the regulator. All of it can be found on the Sharp South website. If you've got any questions, feel free to give us a call or comment in the section below. We'll be glad to answer them. Thank you.